this last but not the least spot, I think I'll let it go. Little apology because Mohit told me about speaking here just a few days ago, and she said 5 minutes. So, I really thought that I would not go into all the things we do. So I'm Shubha Chaudhary from the Archives and Research Center for Ethnomusicology. To give the full name, we are also part of the American Institute of Indian Studies. So working in Ethnomusicology Archive for over 32 years, we've been involved and done a lot of kinds of things that we've been hearing about. We're currently working on a virtual museum website. I've done a big directory of musicians with addresses, samples, themes for a project out of Goa. We've done a 3-year project called Archives and Community Partnership, where we were giving recordings back to the communities where they came from, where we did the archiving in collaboration with communities, using digital technology with all its benefits. So we've done CDs, we've done community broadcasts. So we've been an archive in this era, obviously worked a lot with technology. And I thought I would just skip those things and not show you lots of little projects, because what I'm left at the end of it is still a lot of questions and feeling that we still have all these issues that don't seem solved to me when we're trying to work with communities, we're trying to work with musicians. This is what we do. So it's a viewpoint from the archives, which is a very digital archive in today's days. We work a lot with analog material, how to digitize it, give it back to communities, how can they use it, and so on. And about music and musicians, not about crafts and other sides of it. So I think that to me, the challenge of the intangible is I know craft is a part of ICH, but it's a fact it's still very tangible. There's a product you're dealing with and so forth. And yeah, wanting to move. Okay. No, it's 1, 2, 3. Yes. Alright. This is working. Yeah, okay, I did good. Alright. So, since we're trying to deal all the time with recordings and trying to give musicians access to their own recordings, which seemed to be a thing that was more successful in the last few years as there's more technology and they're able to listen to their own recordings, or there was a desire for many musicians to actually have access to archival material. So I was just trying to see, and I think this overlaps a lot with what Laila talked about right in the beginning. And so I find interesting that we are, as always, I think with craft, we are on some parallel lines here. What do they want to use their recordings for? Instead of saying, it makes us feel good to say, this is just your good feeling in the heart, okay, we are giving the recordings, here you have them. But what do people really want them for, and how do they find them useful? And I think that teaching and learning is something that is now starting to happen quite a bit, that musicians would want their own recordings to say, I want to teach my son, my fingers don't move that fast anymore. There's things that I don't remember the words of something. If I had that recording from the archives, they could learn. So there is a very positive sense of, yes, recordings can be used for teaching and learning. So we're talking about now this digital output of the tradition, which is the recording, for a lot of it. And of course, documentation. I think there is a need for communities to be in charge of their own documentation, because what they want access to is their own memories, not only their own but community memories. Because we're talking about, in most cases, hereditary musicians. We're talking about a whole culture that's been handed down generation to generation. And yes, it changes, it should change, but people want to have access to their own roots, and it should be provided to them in some place. And on the other hand, so there's quite a gap, there is the whole issue of managing their rights and trying to deal with the digital marketplace in some ways. So that's just, as I said, I wanted to just touch on a few issues. Yeah. So what is involved for a rural musician to deal with this digital marketplace? One is that there is free and easy access on the internet with YouTube, with people's blogs. There is absolutely no hesitation, especially peculiarly when it comes to mobile content. Somehow, I did a whole paper on this called the digital dissolve on the mobile, because I think it's broken that digital divide on one hand. But what it has meant is somehow peculiarly people don't seem to feel they should take a permission to record anything on a mobile. It can be uploaded very easily to Facebook and YouTube with no link, and nobody asks a musician whether they want to be up on YouTube. You know, this is one of the things that there is. So in fact, I've also been asked about my work as an archivist to say, do you really feel you need an archives today? Everything is up on YouTube. You know, so there is that whole thing. But is there any curatorial sense? Is there any integrity? Is there any review? Is there any authority for you to be putting up things on YouTube? And how does this work for a musician, for a practitioner whose livelihood is linked to it? There is this feeling, so, you know, if you put on the internet, you don't go through your normal things that you would have to do if you publish, nor do you go through what you would have to do if you broadcast. You put out a CD, if you put out a book, if you do broadcasting, you have to enter into agreements, you have to have certain contracts, but the internet is not viewed as something like that. It's looked at a free and open space, and it is. The other point that I find very interesting in rights is this whole issue of non-profit distribution. You know, we always looked at things as deterrents to say, okay, if this is sold and you get a percentage, or some way, or there's a royalty, or there is some money that is made, and if you can't make money, if we stop you from making money, you will not misuse. That is completely changed with the internet. Because there's lots of people wanting to put up lots of things, whether they have the rights to or not, and since they're not making money from it, feel absolutely no doubt that they have a right to do it. You know, you can just put it, because I'm not going to make money, I'm putting it up for people to enjoy. No, so there is this sense of that the arts, you know, in some ways, at the soft era, this should be free. This is our culture and we should be free to consume it. You can't take somebody's sari or a piece of craft because you feel like it and you like it. So there's an automatic barrier there. But with music which can be reproduced, there is no such barrier there, and you could go ahead. We have something called a performer right in the Indian copyright law. It's not copyright because traditional music cannot be copyrighted. We do not have mechanical copyright in India. In many countries, the act of recording gives you the right. In Indian law, that is not there. Yes, the photographer is an author, but not in the case of the recordings. We have something called the performer right. This came in pretty late. It's kind of changed how a lot of us work now. 92 or 97, I sometimes mix up the date. But that means that the performer has a right over their performance. Not over what they're singing. So I can't say if I sing Rag Kalyan and I can copyright it, no. But my performance, including what I'm speaking right now, is protected under the performer right. And it is automatic. Just the act of performance protects you from that right, which means that a recording thereof, as it says, can also is covered by it. So you actually cannot use it without my permission, and you cannot use it in ways that are against what I was told. So if I'm being told this is being recorded for this conference, for purposes of record, but if I find it up on the internet without my permission, it does violate my rights there. Now this is something that people are really not very aware of, and more than anything, you know, musicians need to be made aware of. So I think that is, and it's a right that can be signed away. We can sign and say, yes, I give you my right and you can use this in whichever way you want. So there is no percentage there, and there is this feeling of 1.5 minutes is allowed and 2.5 minutes is allowed, and there are these strange folklore about copyright, which is actually not true. The law has nothing about how many minutes. But yes, educational uses does not violate the performer right. Education and research is allowed under the performer and doesn't violate it. The other issue that I find working with communities for a long time is a lot of non-financial parameters. This is, again, Laila mentioned some of this. We're talking about acknowledgement, attribution, respect, recognition, which are softer areas, but that somehow we feel that the folk does not need this kind of acknowledgement and attribution. I can tell you very many important institutions nationally which do not give the names of so-called folk performers. Folk is not a word I like at all. But this is what it is. They will only mention the name of the community. They don't even think that the individual needs their name to be recorded in the archives, or even very often on the stage. You will say, this is Laila Tayyabji being accompanied by Marganyas, who are nameless and faceless. They all have turbans and they all look the same. So this is a problem that we have, that I think the need to also develop non-financial parameters in our systems for doing this. And then when we're talking about community expression, there is always this whole issue talking about rights of the community and the individual, since our law doesn't make any provision for community ownership. Now this is again common with crafts. If Chanderi is not something, is one person's right. So you find a way to say, okay, everybody in this village who can be, are they then authorized to be something? So there is that problem, and there is that individual who creates within it. So you create as an individual maybe something that's your own composition, maybe your own design or whatever it is, but it is within the tradition, so there is that conflict there. That's one more issue. So as I'm saying, I'm asking a lot of questions and hoping all these clever people in ICT can give us some ways for people to be able to document themselves, for them to be able to control what they document, to be able to use it they want, the ways they want. Just a few things where I have worked where we have some successes, paid downloads. And sadly, this is not an Indian site, it's the Folkways of the Smithsonian, where we've been able to put up over 200, we're supposed to put up 500 tracks for which we've got permissions, where we've paid in advance for our first 125 downloads to the performers. And so that kind of creates a small stream. And I think that archives also need to be supported, as all of us institutions, we also need to be supported to be able to support the artisans. So that's one way. And I think the mobile is something that's emerging more and more. And I think that mobile-based applications for documenting, for access would be the way to go. Moi wanted to show me, but I have not managed to put it up in any way. We created a small Android-based mobile application that has 6 tracks from some CDs we produced, and they can just be passed around. So anybody who wants it just has to give me the email. I don't know how to, I can just show you my phone and that doesn't look very good. So thank you. Thank you very much.
I think it's been a fascinating session, and unfortunately I have heard so many interesting things, and I'm sure our heads are buzzing with both questions and reactions, but unfortunately we are well over time. So I'm just going to very quickly sum up what has happened here, and hopefully we can persuade Moi to do a session where we are actually going to discuss. I think the whole 1 hour to me seemed to be an extraordinary example of how India and Indians give. Because everybody's presentation was what they have put for other people to see and use, very often at no cost. We have heard very, very little, except perhaps from me, of how we use what other people put up. It has to be a two-way traffic, and somewhere we have to benefit also from the hard work and dedication of people who've given their services free. I don't think taking 10 rupees for a photograph of tribal traditions really does anything either for that tribal community or for the organization that has put in such hard work. We started off with Mr. Singh from the Punjab Digital Heritage, and he is an absolute example. His organization is a wonderful example of just this, of having got together so much fascinating material and giving it. I think it's interesting, at least for me, because I come from a generation, I was one of Midnight's children, and for the first 30 or 40 years of India, we all assumed that the government was going to do everything. And so it's interesting to me to hear from Mr. Singh that government is a very bad custodian and that people are much better. And so maybe we should learn to look after our own heritage rather than just assume that the government is going to do it. I think after that we had Chin and we had this wonderful Bawang instrument, and I think all going to now go home tucking it under our left arm and strumming it and making terrible noises, I'm sure. But if it's good for our hearts, why not? I think their presentation was a great example of the fact that we cannot look at any cultural expression in India, whether it's craft or music or whatever, as in isolation. It is a holistic aspect of society, of culture, of education, of entertainment. And unless we can link all these strands together, as Chin has been doing, we're not really going to get anywhere. Then we had nomadic, their story of their nomadic heart and of how this too is bringing together all these aspects to people in urban surroundings, both in India and abroad, and how important that is for cultures all over the world to interact and understand each other. Ansari Sir talked of his work. Again, I'm anxious that these archives that he's been putting together are used sensitively by the community and not misappropriated by others. Tribal art images, amazing documentation of tribes of India, that one individual has covered 50 tribes in 8 states and has got this archive, this rich archive of photographic images. Once again the question, how can this be used to the benefit of everybody, and how can this organization survive economically once his own passion ends? Huge amounts of raw material, of extraordinary things all over India. How do we capture them? How do we use them? Pilonia, craft and music, as I said, one of my the first design project I ever did in Dastkar. I had been working before as a craft designer, and a very interesting shift from domestic retail to international export with the kind of cultural and creative and design changes that necessitates. Is that a good thing? Is it a bad thing? But a very interesting use of social media and ICT technology for online marketing. And most significantly, I think, the fact that the project is run by the local rural community and that they are partners in this whole thing. I think it's sometimes that NGOs and government are very impatient. They want change to happen quickly. But I think Pilonia is an example, the Barefoot College is an example where through doing things in the rural community, the pace may have been slower, but it's a very integrated project. Through their website, the music is also going all over the world. Is it going free is a question we haven't asked, but I'm sure when they go home, they're going to debate that. Shubha then brought us all to our senses and made us realize that all this wonderful work is not necessarily a good thing, and that we should think about who owns this material that we are putting out so freely, how do we use it. I think it's not just a question of whether the musicians or the craftspeople themselves benefit from this, their images or their music being put online. It's something that I'm very concerned about, is that what is the quality of the music that we are putting? Is the sound? Would these wonderful artisans who can hold a sort of a note and carry it through the air for minutes at a time, what do they really think if they heard how it is translated onto YouTube? I mean, I think that that is something that we need to talk about as well, apart from the issues of payments. So there we have it. What, in the end, are these issues that we have discussed, and what are the benefits of IT? I think we agree that it's a wonderful way to document techniques fairly inexpensively and disseminate them widely. It's a wonderful way of us to interact and learn about other communities. I, for one, in this quite small room, we've had musicians from Rajasthan, different communities. I don't know how much, whether they've ever met each other before. Three different groups of musicians. Do they interact? Do they exchange? And here we are. And now we have the website, we have the Facebook links. We can communicate with each other and become much stronger. And we can, as I said, actually create policies that suit us rather than having them imposed. Because we shouldn't only learn about policy from the internet, we should actually create it on the internet. Sharing is what it's all about. Sharing as a two-way traffic. And I think we all have to thank UNESCO and MOI for giving us this opportunity to share a little bit among ourselves. Thank you.
It was a great session, of course, and we all believe that. Just an experience I would like to share with you all. It might answer all of some of our queries which we were.
Wow, then why were we sitting so long? Why did you speak?
Yeah, that's why I waited for all the questions there. Okay, first of all, I would like to briefly, I would like to, in a quick way, I would like to extend my means. Describe my organization, what we are doing is, at localart.com, what we do is like, we put all those art forms, handmade art forms, on our platform and have those artisans to sell them. Okay. Now, how do we do it? It's like with every product, you find an artisan profile attached with it. Okay. The profile contains how much time and effort the artisan has paid on particular art form, as well as did his family was doing it or he himself is doing it, how much, what raw materials, what tools are being used, and whatever, what all information along with the art form has been displayed there, and not just displayed there. Whenever a person buys it, you would get a product to booklet about it. You know, all things attached in it with the art form. So it's a marketplace for artisans, you know, and the pricing is not 3 folds or 4 folds. Of course, it's directly from the artisan, and we charge a very small amount of percentage on that, and that's how our organization is becoming sustainable on the same side, you know. And I would like to ask another question. Means you are documenting images, but you are putting those images there. But when I see you, means he told me earlier before the session that he did a photography of Meena Drive and Garashia Drive. And he told me, do you know the difference between both the tribes and do you identify them? So I would like to ask, are you putting those documents there along with the photographs? It's the most important.
Yes.
Yeah, that's the most important.
The explanation of each picture will be there.
Yeah, that's
The details will be there.
that was the most important part.
And each picture, there will be 100 tags.
Yeah.
Okay. So in
just the last thing, I thought we all missed out is the marketing of the same. You know, the artisan is more about making and creating art. It's not about marketing. So we of course need a middleman or a person who could actually market it. So as I see, Fedonia have a website and they're putting on their videos. But in 8 months, you could see there in 8 months they had only 85 views. That's not it. You know, you have to have more views and you have to have more of marketing over the same. So having all those things centrally would help us. That's
It's
all.
not just marketing the product, but marketing your site as well.
Exactly.
Okay, it's 6 o'clock and there's going to be the main award ceremony that's happening, so we have to close here. But thank you very much. I'm glad at least to see that the topic was sufficiently exciting that you continue debating. So, and obviously 2 hours is never enough to even to go into the depths of the discussion. Just a comments from UNESCO. So while the 5 presentations are all exciting, it didn't go beyond my imagination either. It's something that I already somehow knew. And just to share with you, the kind of new ideas I'm looking for personally is one, finding a more innovative way of reaching out to people, a space. Like one thing I'm obsessed about is am I going to use metro stations? How am I going to use metro stations using ICT so that people get access to heritage in one way or another, information about their traditions. I think technology might help, but how to do it, that is one thing I'm kind of these days obsessed about. Second areas I think I think new ideas is required is e-governance. There's a lot of good ideas, good projects happening in other governance areas, but when it comes to the craft sectors, while there's some, how many ministries, 11 ministries doing giving some schemes, there's a whole confusion. And many of the schemes don't reach to the artisans. You go to the DC Handicraft website, it's pathetic. I mean, I'm not particularly computer illiterate, but then I'm totally lost on their website. And so can something be done better in terms of e-governance for the craft sector, learning from other sectors' experience? And last but not least, I don't know, some very creative ideas was proposed by you. I don't know how it will function, but how to link disaster management and arts and culture. Now it's something that defies my imagination, so I can't visualize how this is going to be. But if you have any ideas, please elaborate, and UNESCO will be very happy to think about that also. So
yes, UNESCO could sponsor at times some kind of exhibitions which relate to disasters, especially with respect to art, sculpture.
Okay. So anyway, all these cannot be discussed now. So I invite you to meet in the corridors, exchanging the cards, and keep our discussions beyond this session. And as Laila suggested, I'll be very happy to find another opportunity to continue this discussion in another forum. So thank you very much, and hope to see you very soon.